Goliath was a giant, over 9 feet tall. He was oversized from head to the toe. In his gleaming armor, he had a dreadful sword, a javelin, and a spear that matched his size. He was a big man. This man could play against any football club and still win alone. He could qualify for any NBA team. He was huge. He's the guy that you want to be on your side. He's not the kind of guy that you want to be on the other side. And that, just looking at him, standing there, it made Saul and the soldiers of Israel tremble in their skin just at the sight of this huge guy. And he is giving them a chance. He's saying, just bring one of you to fight me. He knows that he can win any fight. He has confidence. He had an armor bearer that went before him. It's like putting my son Wilgie, like the soldiers of Israel looked like Wilgie, and then Goliath would look like Rory, for those of you who know Rory. And he's telling them, just give me one of you to come and fight me. They are scared. Saul and his soldiers are terrified. They are helpless. They are hopeless, but most likely they were worried. Attempting to fight Goliath was a death wish. Facing him is a suicide mission. You only decide to face a person like that if you are ready to die. He was huge and frightening. Experienced soldiers of Israel, together with their king, were afraid and worried. That's what happens to us when we are facing a task that seems to be beyond our abilities, when we encounter a struggle that threatens our life, when we are going through a difficult, when we are dealing with issues like addictions and other challenges that we face. We become afraid and we worry. It happens even to Christians. In fact, John Rice, a theologian, said, worry is putting question marks where God has put a period. Most of the things that we fear in this world are the same things that make us afraid. Worry is putting question marks where God has put a period. It means when we are worrying, we are questioning God's power. But this is, Goliath is a clear portrait, like I said, of the struggles that we encounter, the challenges that come our way, challenges like anxiety, anger, depression, sin, and anything on our way that threatens to disable us, anything that is trying to stop us from becoming what God intends us to be, anything that is trying to make us weak. Whatever you are struggling with, that is your Goliath. That is your giant. Now, some of us are struggling with huge giants. Some of us are struggling with dwarfs. But you're still struggling. That becomes your giant. So the children of Israel are seated there. They're supposed to be fighting. These soldiers are supposed to be fighting, but because they are afraid, they have retreated. You see, there's a hill on this side, there's another hill, and then there is a valley. The Philistines are on the other hill, Israelites are on the other hill, and then Goliath comes down to the valley because that's where the fight is supposed to take place. That's where the battle is supposed to take place. And he's calling them, come down. One of you, let one of you come down here, we fight. We don't have to waste time. The two of us will fight. You will be entertained. Whoever wins, his team wins. None of the Israelite soldiers, including the king, is ready to face Goliath. And then enter David. This is where David comes in. His father has sent him to bring pizza to his brothers who are in the army. He wasn't coming to fight. He was bringing food. And David comes and he can tell there is something that is going on here that isn't right. And then he can feel the fear from the Israeli soldiers. He can tell these guys are so afraid, they're trembling. What's going on? You're supposed to be fighting. And then he hears Goliath defying the God of Israel. He looks at him and David begins to ask, why is this guy being allowed to defy our God? Why are you not dealing with him? What will happen to the person who will deal with this uncircumcised Philistine? And everyone tells David, if you kill him, the king, your family will not pay taxes. And the king will give you your daughter, his daughter to be your wife. You know, those are the rewards that the king has put forth. That's the price. But no one wants to go forward. Now, David wasn't motivated by whatever he was going to get from that. But he was burning inside just hearing this Philistine defy the God of Israel. And so, as he was asking, one of his brothers, Eliab, you remember Eliab? The one that God said he is not the one. He heard David talking, asking about Goliath. And Eliab came, and listen to what he says in verse 28. He comes to David and he says, when Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burnt with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? Why have you come down here? And then he reminded David of his occupation. And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. And they're not even fighting. He is angry at his brother because his brother is inquiring about the men that they are afraid of, and Eliab has courage to discourage his brother. Do you know, can you hear the words? He says he is conceited and wicked in his heart. He's saying that David is excessively proud and ungodly in his heart. The same man that God looked at and said, I have found a man after my own heart. His brothers are looking at him and they're saying he is excessively proud and ungodly. God looks at David, a young boy. He sees a king. His brothers look at him and they see a proud young boy with a wicked heart. The first resistance that David encounters does not come from the other soldiers. It does not come from the king. It doesn't come from Goliath. It comes from his own brother. Listen, sometimes resistance will come from those who are closest to you. Sometimes the people that you expect to support you are the people that are going to resist you. They're the people that are going to put you down. Sometimes the people who are supposed to lift you up are the people that are going to discourage you. You shouldn't be surprised when it happens. And that should teach us to pick our battles. You see, David would have wasted his time fighting his own brother. But David knew, you are not the problem. The problem is the giant. The problem is that Philistine who is defying our gods. I'm not going to waste my time fighting with you. I'm going to focus on the giant. He would have wasted his time. You see, it's good for you to know that sometimes when the people around you are fighting you, they are not the problem. The problem is the enemy of our faith. The problem is much bigger than you may think. When you see churches split and fight, the problem is not the people, but what they are focusing on. And so David, who is he's a skilled shepherd, he's not a soldier. His occupation was tending the sheep. He goes to the king. And he tells the king, if you look at verse 37, I will keep taking you back to some of these verses. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion, the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. You see, the king tells him, you cannot fight this giant. You're just a boy. That's how King Saul sees David. You're just a boy. This giant has been fighting since his youth. He's experienced. And David tells him, well, I'm a boy, but I know the Lord. And the Lord has delivered me from a lion and a bear. And the same Lord can deliver me from this Philistine. David is remembering what God has done in his life, to trust him for what he will do ahead of him. He is reminding himself of the victories that the Lord has brought in his life, to encourage himself to face the giant. In verse 38, so when Saul realizes that David is going to face Goliath now, he's ready to do that. You know what he does? Saul gives him his armor. He takes off his armor and he puts his helmet on David and his body jacket, you know, and David tries them. And he begins to walk, and he can't walk. They are heavy and uncomfortable, and he puts them off. He tells Saul, I cannot use them. I cannot fight with these ones. You see, your battles will be fought using the tools that the Lord provides you. Your battles will be fought by the tools that the Lord provides for you. When it comes to fighting our giants, one size does not fit all. So David goes to face the giant. He has only one weapon on his hands, a sling. A simple but highly effective weapon. Ancient armies used it in battles. A sling has a leather pouch with 2 long cords attached to it, and it can be used to throw a rock. It is as dangerous as a shotgun. It's not a child's toy. So David, even though he has this sling, it is important for you to know that his confidence is not on the sling. His confidence is on the Lord. Listen to what David says in verse 45. Goliath sees him. When David stands before, he begins to go down. He picks 5 smooth stones. He puts them in his shepherd bag, and he's walking down. And Goliath sees him, and Goliath says, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? Come here, and I will give your flesh to the wild animals today." And this is what David says in verse 45 and 47. He said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I will strike you and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." You see, David is saying the Lord will deliver you. David understands that for me to fight you, for me to strike you, the Lord has to deliver you. You are a giant. Only a giant can kill a giant. David is facing Goliath with a sling, but his confidence is in the Lord. So he's facing Goliath with the Lord. Listen. It's not the size of your weapon. It is the size of your God that will determine how you deal with the struggles of your life. It's not the size of your skills. It's not how academic, how educated, how smart you are. It is the size of your God that will determine how you deal with the issues of life. It is the size of your God that will determine how you see the giant. It is the size of your God that will determine your next step of action. When we were in Sunday school as children, there's a song that they used to teach us. It's a very short song. I can teach you right now. We used to sing and say, "Our God is bigger, bigger. Our God is bigger, bigger. Our God is bigger." Can you try that? Let's try it. Our God is bigger, bigger. Our God is bigger, bigger. Our God is big. And the devil smaller, smaller. And the devil smaller, smaller. And the devil small. How you see your God determines how you see your problems. It's not the size of your weapon, it's the size of your God that will determine the step that you take. So Goliath says, "Come," and David is coming. Goliath says, "I'm going to give your flesh to the birds of the air." David says, "I am going to bring you down because the Lord will deliver you to me." And David is going down to the valley. Goliath is angry. He's coming towards David. And David takes a stone, puts on the sling, and he throws it, and it hits Goliath's forehead. He loses his balance, he stumbles, and his huge body hits the ground. Goliath is pronounced dead on the spot. I think it was as quiet as it is. I think at this time the king stood up. The soldiers, everyone, what has just happened? Goliath thought he was facing David. Little did he know he was facing the Lord. Now, you may think that David is the hero here. You may think that David is the real giant here. But let me tell you, the real giant is not David. The real giant is not Goliath. The real giant is the Lord here. He is always the hero. He delivered Goliath to David. And David did what was necessary to be done. And he brought the giant down. I don't know what giants you are facing in your life. I don't know what brings fear and worry in your life. But I know the Lord can take that giant down. I know that the Lord is able to help you and enable you to strike the giants that you face down. Because, like David said, the battle belongs to the Lord. You see, David was facing Goliath, but he knew that the person who is going to fight this giant is a giant that is bigger than him. David was facing Goliath knowing that the battle belongs to the Lord. The question I want to ask you is, will you allow God to interrupt your schedule? Your schedule. You see, David woke up that morning with the intentions of following his schedule. He wasn't going there to fight. He was taking food to his brothers. He had no intentions of getting into the battle, but God interrupted his schedule because he wanted to do something great with David. You wake up in the morning planning to do everything you have, and then the Lord interrupts your schedule. Will you let him do that? Will you allow him to interrupt your schedule so that he can do something great with you? You see, as Christians, everywhere we walk, we believe that Christ is walking with us. And therefore, everywhere we are, there is an opportunity for ministry. There is an opportunity to glorify God. There's an opportunity to do something great, but unless we are sensitive to that, we will miss those opportunities. None of the soldiers thought that God could use them to kill this giant, until a young boy came in without a spear or a sword, but with only a sling. He faced the giant with the Lord. You see, many times God uses ordinary people in ordinary ways to do extraordinary things. And we all have such opportunities if we are sensitive to the Lord's interruptions in our lives. Sometimes you just need to allow yourself to be interrupted. And that's why I'm saying, we must face our giants. And maybe someone here is asking, I still don't understand why. Well, I'll take you back to the theme of this series, because God is making us great. When you realize that God is making you into somebody, He is doing something in your life that should transform who you are, that He is taking you through a process, He is making you great, you will want to face the giants in your life. You will want to deal with those things, those habits, those attitudes that are stopping you from becoming the kind of Christian God intends you to be. Whatever it is that it brings fear and worry in your life, whatever it is that is stopping you from being effective, faithful, and committed, that is your giant. I think the right question we should ask is, how? How can I face my giant? I'll give you 3 answers, 3 points. Number 1, see your giant from the Lord's perspective. You see, all the experienced soldiers looked at Goliath, and what did they see? They saw a giant who could not be defeated. They saw a mountain that could not be climbed. They looked at Goliath, and all they saw was fear, defeat. Goliath reminded them of their own weaknesses. See your giant from the Lord's perspective. When they looked at Goliath and looked at themselves and the weapons that they had, they knew they couldn't fight him. All they saw was the spears, the javelin, and the swords. But David reminds me of Psalm 20 verse 7. Psalm 20 verse 7, where he says, some will trust in chariots and others in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. David looked at the giant, and you know what he saw? He saw a creature that is standing there that can easily be defeated by the Creator. He saw a target that he couldn't miss. He saw an opportunity to trust God for a success. David saw the invisible, and he was able to do the impossible. You see, when you're looking at those struggles of your life, those giants that are trying to stop you, the first thing is ask yourself, how is God looking at this problem? How is God seeing it? We shift our focus. We want to see the way God sees. Is it your mom that said she has snacks for a pet? So for example, I came to your house and I don't know that you guys have snacks for a pet, which I still find weird, but it is okay. I don't know that. So I come to your house, I'm seated there, and your mom, for some reason, she goes to the kitchen, probably to make coffee, and then I see a snake. And I start shouting, I climb on the table, and there's a snake in the house. And your mom comes rushing from the kitchen, what is it? And there's a snake. And then your mom picks it up. And she tells me, oh, it's our pet. Do you know how that will make me feel? I'll be ashamed of myself. I will feel much safer now. Why? Because I know it's not a threat. Why? Because I am now looking at the snake the same way your mom looks at it. I am looking at the snake from your mom's perspective. It's no longer a threat to me because the one who owns it doesn't fear it. I am seeing it from your mom's perspective and I am no longer afraid. I may still be uncomfortable because I don't like snakes. I may not want to be closer to it, but it's no longer a threat because if it begins to threaten me, I know whom to call. The first step is seeing the giant from God's perspective. Here is the second one. Face your giant with the Lord's power. So for the first point, I'll give you verse 36. Sorry, I forgot that. Verse 36 for the first point. Where David said, your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. And you can add verse 37 too, where he says, the Lord who delivered me will deliver me. See your giant from the Lord's perspective. Number 2, face your giant with the Lord's power. Verse 45. In verse 45, David says, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I will strike you down and cut off. Oh, that's verse 46. Verse 45, sorry. Second point. In Psalm 27, verse 1, David said, the Lord is my strength and my shield. Whom shall I fear? You see, when David was facing Goliath, he didn't have a shield. He did not have a shield. Goliath was at a very good, he could kill David, he could strike David wherever he wanted. But I think David was saying this psalm in his heart. The Lord is my strength and my shield. Whom shall I fear? David was facing Goliath with the Lord's power. Remember, I told you, the battle belongs to the Lord. Remember, I told you, the real giant is the Lord. No matter how powerful your giants may be, no matter how strong they may appear to you, the Lord is more powerful. And guess what? He wants you to win. The Lord is more powerful, and he wants us to win. See the giant from the Lord's perspective. Face the giant with the Lord's power. Here is number 3. Fight your giant with the end in mind. Fight your giant with the end in mind. This is very important. Verse 46 and 47. David says, this day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I will strike you down and cut off your head today. I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. David is describing everything that is going to happen as if it has already happened. He can see the end from the beginning. He's fighting, he's facing Goliath with the end in mind. Fighting with the end in mind means painting a picture of your victory, trying to visualize how victorious you looks like. You see, for example, if you are struggling with addiction, let's say it's alcohol, you are an alcoholic. When you begin to fight that, first, you've done all the 1 and 2. At this point now, try to visualize how the victorious you, how the person delivered from that alcoholism looks like. Try to see yourself past that, how you look like, what kind of life will you be living, what kind of a person will you be. And then now you begin the fight. If you can see, if you can believe it, you will see it. And if you can see it, you will be motivated to pursue it. Fight with the end in mind. It's the same thing we tell students. You have, when you are a student, you have to begin seeing yourself. What kind of a person do you want to be? You want to be a lawyer? Start seeing yourself as a lawyer and then begin the journey that leads you there. If you can see, if you can visualize, it will help you on the decisions that you make on the way because you have the picture in your mind. David is visualizing victory. He can see that because he believes in the power of the Lord. He's looking at him from the Lord's perspective and he can see, I'm going to put you down and I will cut off your head. And the people will know that there is a God in Israel. Fight your giants with the end in mind.